Summer at the Dursleys by Mastercardin42. Chapter 3. The Rest Come. Like the previous nights, Harry's sleep was plagued with nightmares. Nightmares of Voldemort, of the graveyard, of Cedric falling to his death. He tossed and turned in his bed, sweat running down his head. Harry's anxieties were higher tonight because of being back at Privet Drive. "Kill the spare!" cried out Voldemort. "Avada Kedavra!" said Wormtail, casting the curse and hitting Cedric. "No! Cedric!" screamed Harry. As Cedric's body fell, Harry stared at the lifeless corpse. Cedric's face was unmoving. His eyes were wide open, staring up at nothing. However, soon the mouth of Cedric began moving, while the rest of him remained motionless, as if it was separate from the rest of his body. "Harry," Cedric's seemingly dead body spoke, "this is all your fault." "No! Cedric!" called out Harry. "You gave him your blood. You allowed him to come back. You told me to take it with you." "No!" Harry pleaded. "He'll come for you. He'll come for your friends." "Harry!" Ron said, shaking his covers. "Harry, wake up!" With a great jolt, Harry was up, shaking and sweaty. Seeing Ron beside him, he realised he was back at Privet Drive. "What happened?" he asked panickingly. "You were having a nightmare. You kept repeating Cedric's name," told Ron, concerned. Harry was quick to bounce back to reality, wiping the sweat off his brow and taking a deep breath. "What time is it?" asked Harry. Ron gestured to the electronic clock on the bedstand. The bright red lettering read 5:43 a.m. "Great," sighed Harry. "What's wrong?" asked Ron. However, Ron's question was answered when Harry's walrus-like uncle, wearing a striped robe that barely fit him, barged into the room, his face a bright shade of red. "What the devil is all this noise?" snapped Vernon. "It's nothing," said Harry quickly. "You are aware of what time it is? Is it that your lot have no conception of time, or no consideration of others to care?" asked Vernon, still angry. "He just had a nightmare," Ron said, getting to his feet. "Wouldn't you be more concerned that your nephew was having a bad dream?" Vernon grew redder. "You little..." "Why don't we go downstairs, Ron? I'll begin breakfast for you all. My treat," Harry intercepted quickly. This only appeared to calm Vernon down slightly, his face beginning to lighten. Although still upset, Ron kept to himself, glaring angrily at Vernon. "See to it that this doesn't happen again," Vernon said sternly, shutting the door behind him. "This is going to be a long summer, isn't it?" grunted Ron. "Oh, yeah," said Harry, finding a bit of amusement with his friend's discomfort. "Why wouldn't your aunt cook breakfast?" said Ron. "It forced me to do most of the chores. Though I imagine with you guys here they might force you to work as well," answered Harry. "Mum makes us do chores all the time, but she never makes us cook, although she seems to take joy from cooking." At Ron's words, both he and Harry began to imagine Mrs. Weasley's cooking. Her succulent roast beef and delicious puddings made both of the boys' stomachs rumble. "I'll go make you and myself breakfast. My aunt and uncle are usually up in about an hour. Do you want to help?" Harry looked over his shoulder to see Ron already back to sleep. Never mind. Heading downstairs, Harry took out the bread, eggs, toast and frying pan. It had been a while since he cooked for anyone. While the Dursleys forced him to make breakfast every morning when he was young, after they learnt Harry was a wizard, the duties of cooking breakfast went back to Petunia. Although it had been some time since he did any cooking, he was quick to remember. By the time he was finished, Ron and his relatives were already downstairs. While Ron appeared impressed Harry could actually cook, his aunt and uncle simply shrugged, trying to appear as unimpressed as ever. Ron took no time in making himself a plate of eggs, bacon and toast, and soon began stuffing his mouth. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia glared at him, disgusted. "Must you eat like that?" sneered Petunia. "Were you raised in a barn?" grunted Vernon. Harry rolled his eyes. Ron was eating better than his aunt and uncle's own child, Dudley, who regularly belched and stuffed his face at the table. Actually, said Ron, swallowing, I do live on a farm. Are you getting fresh? Snapped Vernon. Seems awfully rude to say that to hosts allowing you room and board, joined in Petunia. He's not being rude. He does live on a farm. The Weasleys have a large farm with pigs and chickens, Harry said matter-of-factly, which cooled his relative's nerves. Country folk, lacking any manners or appreciation, spouted Vernon, going back to reading his copy of the Daily Mail. Ron ignored him and went back to eating. Before another fight could break out, the phone rang, and Petunia was quick to answer. Dursley residence. Mrs. Dursley speaking. Why, may I ask who's calling? Answered Petunia cheerfully. Her smile soon faded, and she gestured for Harry. It's for you. Hello? Harry answered, confused. Harry? said Hermione. Hermione! It's Hermione, he said to Ron. Good, I had just the right number after all. Just wanted to make sure to call you before I'm dropped off. Hope I'm not calling too early, said Hermione. No, everyone's just getting up. Great. Hope you and Ron had a good night's sleep? Asked Hermione positively. Yeah, said Harry. It was peaceful. Hermione could tell when Harry was lying, yet decided not to push the matter further. Well, that's nice. My parents should be arriving in 20 minutes. Just wanted to give you a head up. Does she want to talk to me? Said Ron from across the room. Do you want to talk to Ron? Asked Harry. Is he eating? Said Hermione. Yes, replied Harry. Then no. I'll see you then. Hope they're treating you boys well. Bye, said Hermione. See you then. Bye, said Harry, hanging up. Why didn't she want to talk to me? Asked Ron with a mouthful of eggs. She thought you were busy, replied Harry, sitting down in front of his plate. Looking around the table, Harry saw that besides Ron, who was on his second helping, his aunt and uncle awkwardly and resentfully sat. Even his uncle, who was stuffing his moustache-covered mouth with eggs and bacon any other morning, was resigned to sit and take small helpings of his breakfast. His aunt followed her husband. The two Dursleys would only look up to glare angrily and disgusted expressions at Harry and his friend. Clearly they were still upset they had to share not only their house but their food as well with two other wizards. Harry couldn't help but take amusement at his relative's discomfort, even offering to clear the plates. However, soon the resentment Vernon felt gave way to anger. Thankfully, before he could act on this, the doorbell rang. Hermione was here. Harry rushed to the door and, opening it, had to have Hermione rush in and hug him. Hermione! Is this necessary? It's only been a day, said Harry, surprised. I've just been worried. After what you've been through, Hermione replied, letting him go. Nice to see you again, young man, said Mr. Granger, holding his daughter's bag in one hand and reaching out to shake Harry's with the other. Nice to see you again as well, answered Harry. What a lovely house you have, said Mrs. Granger, peering in. Soon enough, Vernon and Petunia were closer to the door, staring at Hermione and her parents. Are these your relatives? Asked Hermione, looking over her shoulder. Yes, Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. This is my friend, Hermione Granger. These are her parents, the Grangers. Unlike me or Ron, her parents are not magical. They are, in fact, dentists, introduced Harry. Both his aunt and uncle were stunned silent, staring dumbfounded at the Grangers at the door. Hermione and her folks seemed to be, for lack of a better word, normal. They looked normal, they talked normal, they were no different from the Dursleys. Mr. and Mrs. Granger even held respectable, mundane occupation of dentistry. If it weren't for the fact their child was a witch, the Dursleys could have had them over for dinner once. Mr. Hugo Granger's dentist, said Mr. Granger, shaking his wife's hand. This is my wife, Michelle Granger, also a dentist. You have a nice home here, said Mrs. Granger to Petunia. You must be Harry's aunt and uncle. Our daughter has told us a lot about Harry. Quickly, Vernon and Petunia snapped back to reality. Thank you, said Petunia proudly. Even if their daughter was a witch, Petunia never let a compliment to her home go unnoticed. Where should I leave this? Said Mr. Granger, gesturing to Hermione's suitcase. I'll take that, offered Harry. I'll bring it up to the guest room. Be right back. You sure you don't need help? Asked Mrs. Granger kindly. No, anything for a friend, said Harry. Harry brought up Hermione's suitcase, which was the same size and weight of a Hogwarts trunk. As Harry opened the door, he realised he had never been in the guest bedroom before, as Aunt Petunia forbid it. It was only slightly smaller than Dudley's room and his aunt and uncle's room, yet it was still a lot bigger than his. Despite it only being used by Vernon's horrid sister Aunt Marge during her rare visits, Petunia treated the rest of the house and cleaned it up regularly. The bed was made, the scent of cheap air freshener was potent, and the wallpaper was brightly coloured. Harry felt for a second a bit of anger that this room was better than his, yet it immediately simmered when he realised his friend would be occupying the room. Harry placed her suitcase in the corner of the dresser before heading back downstairs. Ron had joined the Grangers, talking with Mr. Granger while Mrs. Granger was saying repeated goodbye to her daughter. "Ah, Harry," said Mr. Granger, "me and my wife are about to be off." "Are you sure you have to go? I'm sure my aunt and uncle wouldn't mind you staying." "No, it's an hour to Hampstead, and we have an appointment at noon," said Mr. Granger, turning to his daughter, kissing her on the forehead. "Take care of yourself. Write or call to us every day. Contact us if anything goes wrong." "I will, Dad," said Hermione. "Here," said Mrs. Granger, handing Vernon a slip of paper. "It's our numbers, both our home and work numbers. Call us if there's an emergency, although our daughter is a pretty well-behaved child when she's home." "Love you, sweetie." "Love you too, Mum," replied Hermione, waving her goodbye to her parents. Once the door was closed, Petunia and Vernon turned to Hermione, their expressions coldly stern. "Now, listen, young lady," said Petunia firmly. "We have some rules to set forth." "Of course," replied Hermione, not intimidated, treating Harry's relatives like a professor at Hogwarts.
"First off, none of your lot's freakiness or oddities, especially around the neighbours."
"Yes, sir," replied Hermione, trying to hide the insult she felt.
"Second, you will not mention the word magic in my house,"
said Vernon. "Yes," replied Hermione, her voice becoming strained. "Third, one step out of line, and you'll be back home to Hampstead."
"Got it,"
commanded Vernon. "Yes," answered Hermione, still trying to keep her composure, clearly taking offence to what this man was saying.
"Good,"
said a rather pleased Vernon, turning to Harry.
"See to it that the others are as obedient as this one."
Ron looked like he was about to shout at Vernon when Harry spoke up. "Do you want some breakfast? I saved you a plate." "Thanks, Harry. But me and my parents ate something before we came," replied Hermione, still uncomfortable. "Then let me show you to your room. Ron, you can finish our plate," offered Harry.
"I'll join you guys.
Your uncle can take it," said Ron as Vernon raced to claim the last plate. Glad his table was wizard-free. "Okay, thanks. Nice meeting you," Hermione said to Vernon and Petunia before she followed Harry and Ron to the upstairs. Harry rushed both of his friends into the guest room, knowing Petunia would try and listen at the foot of the stairs. When the door was closed, Hermione gave Harry a forced smile, attempting to hide her discomfort. Ron seemed pleased that someone else was here to witness the awfulness of Harry's relatives. Harry was trying to shrug it off, yet, unlike at Hogwarts, whenever his friends asked about the Dursleys, he couldn't just change the topic. "They're not as bad as I thought," said Hermione, strained.
"Not as bad?"
Ron said, scandalised.
"They're worse. You should have seen that bloated walrus on the way here."
"They seemed somewhat nice to my parents," said Hermione, unconvinced.
"That's because your parents are normal," replied Ron sarcastically, putting emphasis on the word.
"What?" "Hermione, your parents are muggles. My relatives hate anything they find abnormal, which includes all magic, and love everything ordinary. The reasons they liked your parents is because they're not like us," Harry explained, gesturing to the three of them. Any attempts Hermione had at reasoning the terribleness of Harry's relatives faded. She gave out a sigh and looked at Harry sympathetically. "We always sort of wondered. I mean, we always knew they mistreated you. When Ron told me about the bars and when you asked for food, well, we always knew it was bad, but not this bad," said Hermione.
"Yeah, it was pretty clear.
At least you don't have to hear Mum talk about them," said Ron. While this comment lifted some of the tension and brought grins to Harry and Ron's faces, Hermione still looked at Harry like a worrisome teacher. "They never hit you, did they?" said Hermione, dreading the answer.
"No,"
Harry replied quickly, tired that he had to explain this again. "At worst, they lock me in my room or try to starve me."
"That's still pretty bad," I mean, Mum would send us to our rooms, but never deny us food, said Ron, lightly. Well, there's the bright side. If they give us any trouble, we'll just call Ron's mum, said Harry. That's a good idea. You don't know how many times Dad had to stop her from sending them a howler, replied Ron, half joking and half serious. A small smile finally appeared on Hermione's face at Ron's comment. That would be quite the sight. Remember when she sent you one? Reminded Hermione. Ron's smile faded as the dreaded memory of his mother's screaming that echoed through the great hall returned to him. Harry and Hermione couldn't help but chuckle at their friend's discomfort, as well as the thought of the Dursleys cowering at an imaginary letter with the temper and voice of Mrs. Weasley. That reminds me, though, Mum wants me and you to write to her every 3 days. She wanted us to write every day, but Dad talked her down, said Ron. She's not alone. My parents want me to call them tonight, and every other week. Which reminds me, you think your aunt and uncle would let me borrow their phone? Asked Hermione. I suggest you use Mrs. Fig's phone instead. Last time I got a call, my uncle nearly had a heart attack. Harry replied, gesturing to Ron, who smiled brightly. Besides, not even my aunt or cousin are allowed to make calls outside of Surrey. Excuse me, called Petunia from the foot of the stairs. What are the 3 of you doing in there with the door closed? Me and Ron were just helping Hermione get settled, called Harry. Seems inappropriate. 2 boys in a girl's room, murmured Petunia huffily. You 2 go down. This will only take a minute, reassured Hermione. The 2 boys went downstairs to find Petunia, silently scathing as they walked down. Vernon was nowhere in sight, certainly gone off to work, and judging by how quickly he left, he was probably glad to be out of the house and away from the wizards. Harry and Ron stood in the living room, waiting awkwardly for Hermione, as Petunia glared resentfully at both boys. They simply ignored her. Finally, after a long moment, Hermione joined them chippily. So, she asked, what's on the brackets for today? Well, I am going shopping. I'm getting the house ready and prepared for a lovely dinner for my son Dudley, to celebrate his return home, and his accomplishment as Smelting's boxing champion, said Petunia proudly. Is that your son? Asked Hermione, pointing to the large family picture of the Dursleys placed in the centre of the wall. Yes, replied Petunia affectionately. My little Diddykins. Suddenly her expression changed from sentimentality to sternness. So, I want you 3 out of the house or in your rooms. Where are we supposed to go, and what are we supposed to do in our rooms for an entire day? Complained Ron. Before Petunia could respond with some snide or angry remark, Harry rose up. I'll show them around the neighbourhood, and we can help our friends prepare for Ginny and Neville. Good thinking, Harry. I've heard a lot of things about Privet Drive. It would be nice to see it, said Hermione complimentarily. Come on, boys. Petunia stared as the trio left the house, and breathed a sigh of relief when they were gone. Ron and Hermione scanned the neighbourhood as they walked quietly alongside the sidewalk of Privet Drive. For one of those rare instances, Hermione seemed to share Ron's feelings, looking around the setting with a dull uninterest. Honestly, this is no better than my street, said Hermione quietly. Say what you will about the Burrow, but at least you're guaranteed to not be bored, added Ron. No doubt I'd rather be there or at Hermione's than here, Harry replied, gesturing to the entire neighbourhood. So, did you know this Mrs. Fig was working with Dumbledore? Asked Hermione. No, in fact for years I thought she was just some crazy kook. Never thought she worked with Dumbledore, answered Harry, still surprised by the revelation. What's she like? Asked Ron, worried about the answer. Hermione might like her. She has a lot of cats. Number 16 Wisteria Walk, the address of Mrs. Fig, was thankfully only 15 minutes from number 4 Privet Drive. Both Ron and Hermione stared at the uncommon and bland houses of Little Whinging. They were surprised to see neighbours glare or turn away from them as they walked, though Harry just ignored them. He had failed to tell either of them that the Dursleys had lied to all of their neighbours, friends, and the whole of Little Whinging that Harry attended a school for criminals. But they'd soon find out, some way. Why are people staring? Asked Ron. I'll tell you later, said Harry, as they walked up to number 16 Wisteria Walk. The Fig house looked exactly the same, and even outside of the smell of cabbage was unmistakable. However,
One bright change was Mrs. Fig herself, who immediately opened the door with a wide smile, welcoming the trio into her home. The Mrs. Fig Harry remembered was slow, dull, and seeming to be just like everyone else in Little Whinging. Yet this Mrs. Fig was excited and lively. "Well, this is pleasant. You're early," greeted Mrs. Fig. "I wasn't expecting you three until noon. You must be Ron Weasley. You look exactly like a Weasley, I must say." "Thanks," said Ron awkwardly, confused as to whether or not this was a compliment or not. "And you must be Hermione Granger. Albus tells me you're quite clever," said Mrs. Fig, making Hermione blush. "You're in contact with Professor Dumbledore?" said a puzzled Ron. "You mean Albus?" "Yes. He and my family go way back. My father, Abram Fig, was a wizard. Worked with him during the war with... Well, why don't I tell you inside? Come on in. Come on in," said Mrs. Fig, rushing the trio inside. Once inside, Mrs. Fig's cats swarmed on them, purring and rubbing their backs against the three, making Ron grunt and Hermione smile. Harry couldn't remember Mrs. Fig's pets showing him such affection in his previous visits. However, the cats seemed to take an instant liking to Hermione, one even jumping onto Hermione's arms, much to her enjoyment. "Are your cats part Kneazle?" asked Hermione. "Why, yes they are," replied Mrs. Fig proudly, sitting a warm teapot off the stove. "How do you think they always come best in show?" Mrs. Fig placed 4 cups under coasters on the kitchen floor and gestured for the trio to take a seat, which they obliged. After pouring hot tea into each cup, Mrs. Fig took a seat herself, blowing on her tea ever so slightly before taking a sip. "You seem different," said Harry, staring puzzled at this new Mrs. Fig. This comment caused Mrs. Fig's expression to shift to upset, even a bit of remorse. I didn't mean to upset you," said Harry quickly. No, it isn't you. I must apologize, Mr. Potter, for making your time here so miserable. I knew that if the Dursleys thought you were having a good time, enjoying yourself in any way, they would never let you come. Not here ever again," said Mrs. Fig apologetically. "They don't even like it when you're enjoying yourself?" snapped Ron, outraged. "Any ill feelings you have towards Harry's relatives, I share and prefer for you to openly express," grunted Mrs. Fig, sighing at the mention of the Dursleys. "Why didn't you tell Harry he was a wizard? Or about his parents?" asked Hermione, meekly, not wishing to upset Harry. "Dumbledore's orders. He thought you weren't ready for all of this, magic and all that. It wasn't easy, you know." "It's fine, actually," replied Harry modestly. "You have to realize, one of the things most of the adults in your life care about is keeping you safe," said Mrs. Fig. "Then why make him live with them?" blurted out Ron. Harry, Hermione, and Mrs. Fig all stared at him, yet Ron kept his stoic expression. "Then why have him live with them?" repeated Ron. "They hate and mistreat him. And Harry clearly hates it here too. Why have him there?" Mrs. Fig took a long sip from her cup and stared at the 3 teens. "I don't think I'm the one who should be answering that," she said. "What does that mean?" asked Ron. "It's fine, mate," Harry assured, even though he was wondering the same thing as well. "Ron!" snapped Hermione in a part whisper. Before Ron could argue further with the poor old woman, the telephone rang, and Mrs. Fig was forced out of the room. "I have to take that." Once Mrs. Fig was gone, Hermione glared at Ron. "It's not like you haven't been thinking this exact same thing. You always said Harry should be taken out of there," retorted Ron, causing Hermione to blush and turn to Harry. "It's fine, Hermione," assured Harry. "It's not I haven't wanted it myself." While Harry disliked his friends discussing him behind his back like his other classmates, it was a common thought to Harry. Since Dumbledore had allowed his friends to accompany him here, he's wondered it more and more. "I agree with you, but that doesn't mean be rude to that nice lady," said Hermione. "Rudeness? That's what you care about? You should have been here last night. That was real rudeness," said Ron. "Two wrongs do not make a right," retorted Hermione fiercely.
Sensing a row, Harry was just about to excuse himself when a commotion from the back room caused the trio's attention. "Arthur, you don't have to scream into the phone. Talk normally," complained Mrs. Fig. "Dad," said Ron, rising from his seat. "Why would he be using the phone?" asked Harry, concerned. Before Hermione could answer, Ron was up and heading to the back room, where a very annoyed Mrs. Fig was trying to speak to Arthur Weasley over the telephone. Harry and Hermione were not far behind. Arthur, you're talking through the wrong end. Turn the phone upside down. Yes, I can hear you just fine." Mrs. Fig saw the trio and her annoyance seemed to fade. "Ah, Harry, please come over and take this. Arthur, I'm going to hand you over to Harry. You can talk to him." Mrs. Fig handed the phone over to a confused Harry. Ron, who probably wanted to speak to his father, looked disappointed. "Why couldn't I talk to him?" asked Ron. "Have you ever used a telephone before?" replied a sceptical Mrs. Fig. "Once," replied Ron defensively. "And how did it go, I wonder?" sassed Mrs. Fig. Hermione giggled, while Ron laid back. Harry, ignoring both of them, tried to listen into the phone set. "Hello, Harry? Hello?" it said a clear Mr. Weasley from the other end of the line. "I'm here, Mr. Weasley," Harry answered. "What is it? Is everything okay? Any change of plans?" "No, Neville and Ginny should be arriving a little afternoon, as planned. I only called because I've always wanted to use the telephone," replied Mr. Weasley, sounding like a giddy child playing with a new toy. Harry couldn't help but smile, amused by Mr. Weasley's tone. "It's fine. Hermione arrived, safe and sound. Ron and I are doing all right as well. Nothing to worry about." "How are you using a phone?" "Dumbledore brought it by to ease some of Molly's nerves. It's enchanted. We thought it was the best way to communicate in the Muggle world. Though I'll try to refrain from calling your relatives." "Thanks," said Harry, remembering Ron's horrible call to number 4 Privet Drive his third year. "Molly, I was about to ask him," said Mr. Weasley, clearly talking to his wife on the other end. "Are your relatives treating you and Ron well?" "As well as ever," said Harry, tired. Arthur sighed. "Well, at least they're keeping in line. Now, both Ginny and Neville should be arriving by Floo at Arabella's a little after 12. Despite the Ministry's current opinion of you and Dumbledore, I have a few friends in the Department of Magical Transportation who owe me a favour or two. Then the Ministry knows nothing of Arabella." "Fine, I'll ask them, Molly. Is there anything you three need?" "Ron, Hermione, you want anything?" said Harry. "I'm fine," answered Hermione. "Mum sending any food?" asked Ron loudly. "Ron wants to know if Mrs. Weasley is sending any food," asked Harry. "Already on it. Molly is sending Ginny over with sandwiches, pastries, and whatever Ginny can carry. If you need to contact us, Mrs. Fig should have a number, though it may take me a while to learn how to answer." As Arthur was speaking, Harry heard a commotion from the other end of the phone. "I have to go, Harry. Percy just stopped by for a surprise visit, and he looks excited. Give Ron and Hermione my love, and remember, take care. Now, how in the blazes do you hang up?" "Thanks." And he put the phone back in the slot. "Take care," said Harry, hanging up. "What did Arthur want?" asked Mrs. Fig, Ron and Hermione listening in. "Just wanted to check in and remind us of the plan. Ginny and Neville should be here afternoon," said Harry. "Oh yeah, and Percy stopped by, and according to your father, he looked excited." "Knowing Percy, it's probably about the exciting world of proper cauldron use," said Ron, making Hermione giggle. "You three better go and finish tea before it gets cold. Your friends should be here in a few hours, and I need to help cleaning out both guest rooms," said Mrs. Fig, pushing the trio back into the kitchen. The rest of the day was surprisingly pleasant. Harry, Ron and Hermione helped clear out as much of the clutter and knickknacks out of the 2 guest bedrooms, carrying most of it out to the basement. They suspected it had been a while since Mrs. Fig had had any guests, as Harry and Hermione spent a large portion of the morning dusting and vacuuming. Hermione had organised Mrs. Fig's belongings into separate boxes, 1 box for knickknacks, 1 box for old cat toys, 1 for old photos. While most of it was garbage Mrs. Fig had been meaning to throw away, there were a surprising few treasures, like an old picture with Dumbledore and a strange-looking man. Mrs. Fig, who is this with Dumbledore?" Mrs. Fig smiled brightly at it.
Oh, that's my father. He worked at the Ministry of Magic, like your friend's father. Dumbledore helped him get his job. When was this taken? Hermione asked, looking at the picture. 40 years ago, or close. My father died 30 years ago with Mother. Dragonpox. Awful thing. The dragonpox, not my parents, replied Mrs. Figg fondly. Albus promised my father to look after me before he died. When your parents died, Albus asked me to keep an eye on you. You were quite the troublemaker, you know. Harry and Ron smiled while Hermione looked annoyed. Yes, they are, she said. You get it from your father, said Mrs. Figg, getting all their attention. Did you know my parents? Asked a surprised Harry. Not personally, no. Albus told me about them. Said he used to cause a lot of mischief, him and that Sirius Black fellow. Hermione smiled. Harry smiled. Yeah, they were quite the pair. I was surprised when Albus told me he was innocent. Though, even Dumbledore thought he was guilty, added Mrs. Figg. At that moment, a loud pop was heard from the Figg living room, followed by a loud grunt and what seemed like large items hitting the floor. While Ron, Harry, and Hermione all looked surprised and puzzled, Mrs. Figg looked glad and a bit excited. Come on, she said to the three of them. What was that? Asked Ron. They're here, answered Mrs. Figg, heading downstairs. Realising what the noise really was, the trio followed the old lady down the stairs and into the spacious living room to find Neville. He was covered in ashes and trying to get to his feet, while two large suitcases and a Hogwarts trunk lay on the floor. Clearly he was not used to using flue powder. While he was in a position of discomfort, the moment he saw his friends, a gracious smile, one they'd never seen on Neville, grew and he immediately got to his face. Hiya, guys, said Neville, rushing over to them. Hey, Neville, replied Harry. Bumpy ride? Asked Hermione, looking behind him. Yeah, first time using flue powder. Gran wanted to come along with me, but we could only have me and Ginny come through, asked Neville, getting his trunk and suitcase together. Is she here yet? No, but she should be here soon, answered Ron. Here, let me help you with those, said Harry, bending down to pick up one of Neville's suitcases. Oh, I can handle it, replied Neville. No, it's fine. We can help you, said Hermione, taking his trunk. I'll take that for you, offered Ron. No, I got it, Hermione replied, surprised and even taken aback by Ron's civility. Thanks, anyway. You're welcome, said Ron. Harry observed this exchange between his friends with a fierce curiosity. Harry looked at Ron and Hermione closer. Thinking for a minute, he actually saw them blush for a moment. Before he could come to any conclusion, Mrs. Figg clapped her hands, glad for more guests. Harry, Hermione, and Neville, is it? Asked Mrs. Figg, partially addressing the entire room. Yes, Neville Longbottom. I'm guessing you're Mrs. Figg, replied Neville, reaching his hand out to shake Mrs. Figg's hand. Arabella Figg, introduced Mrs. Figg. If you could just follow me to your room, it's on the top floor. Harry, Hermione, could you take these up for me? For some reason, Neville's trunk, which Hermione would be carrying, weighed the same as a 30-pound dumbbell. Ron, on instinct, took the other side of the trunk as they went upstairs. Thanks, sighed Hermione. You're welcome, replied Ron. Neville, what do you have in here? Rocks? No, just my Hogwarts stuff and my herbology gear. I wanted to pack lightly for the rest, just for clothes. Why do you need 2 suitcases just for clothes? I wanted to pack lightly, but Gran insisted I bring all that, sighed Neville, gesturing his head to the suitcases. When they reached Neville's room, Ron and Hermione dropped his suitcase onto the floor and gave out a breath of relief, while Harry and Neville left the 2 suitcases on the bed. The second guest room that Neville was to occupy was quaint, to say the least, but homely enough for comfort, though the pictures of Mrs. Figg's cats on the walls were a little bit creepy. Nevertheless, Neville seemed absolutely at home. It's not much, but it will do for now, said Mrs. Figg, staring at the room. It's perfect, beamed Neville. Do you want us to give you a minute to unpack? Offered Mrs. Figg. No. Would you mind if I do it later? Asked Neville. Not at all. I was just about to make some sandwiches for lunch. Come on down, you 4. Harry looked at Neville for a moment. Harry couldn't quite understand, but seeing Neville so happy, gave him a rewarding sense. Since the revelation of Neville's parents, Harry's view on his plump friend had changed. This went beyond sympathy towards him, as Harry began to feel a strange connection to his friend. They were both casualties and victims of the war. Most of their lives had been a series of misfortune and misery, and had led back to Voldemort. Every death, every victim, every orphan, every widow, every one of them was caused by Voldemort, with Cedric added to the lot. But Harry was damned if he let anyone else die by his hands. "You coming, Harry?" asked Neville. "Oh, yeah, right behind you." "Oh, and Neville?" "It's great to have you here," replied Harry honestly. "It's great to become friends with you outside school," beamed Neville as the two headed downstairs. Harry and Neville joined the others downstairs, while Mrs. Fig was in the kitchen, getting the sandwiches she prepared from the fridge. "Does your grandmother doesn't mind you staying in a Muggle neighbourhood?" asked Hermione as she saw Neville beside her. "No, actually," answered Neville, surprised. "She was glad I was spending some time with friends. I'm usually pretty lonely over the summer." "Same," replied Hermione. "You guys have no idea," said Harry, appreciating his friends more and more. "I'd say I agree, but it's never lonely at the Burrow, especially with my mum around. Always someone coming in and out. Sometimes even Bill or Charlie would stop by," said Ron reminiscingly. "Gran was a little nervous at first. She believes you and Dumbledore, by the way," said Neville to Harry. "But Dumbledore assured her I'd be safe." "Mum was the same at first. But the way she figured it is, Harry over here needed us now more than ever," said Ron. "Speaking of your family, when did they say Ginny would be arriving?" asked Neville, staring at the fireplace. "He didn't give a specific time, just said a little afternoon. She should be here soon," replied Neville. But she didn't come soon. In fact, Ginny was extremely late. 4 hours had passed since Neville had arrived, and Mrs. Fig's fireplace was plainly silent. All the sandwiches were eaten, and even Neville had dozed off while waiting. Mrs. Fig had even spent one of these hours taking one of her cats for a short walk, only coming back disappointed that nothing had happened. She finally decided to go upstairs and take a nap. While Harry and Hermione sat bored on the couch, Ron was pacing back and forth. A growing tension and fear was brewing within him. "What's taking so long?" asked Ron to the entire room, waking up Neville. "Did she come?" asked Neville, half asleep. "No, you can go back to sleep if you want," said Hermione. "Did Mr. Weasley mention any delays on the phone, Harry?" "No. It seemed like everything was going as planned," replied Harry. "You think Mrs. Fig has the number?" replied a worried Ron. "Yeah, she does. But I don't know where it is." "And you shouldn't wake Mrs. Fig," answered Harry. Ron rushed into the kitchen, looking feverishly around all through the kitchen for any sign of this number, even though he had very little idea of what he was looking for. Harry and Hermione soon joined him. "If you're looking for a number, it would probably be on the outside of the fridge door. But Ron, I don't know if this is really something to be worried about," said Hermione. "Hermione, they haven't called. And she's 4 hours late. What if something happened? What if..." Ron said in a panicky tone, dreading finishing his sentence. "What if they were wrong, and you know who did attack?" Immediately, the fear Ron was feeling extended to Harry. What if the Death Eaters attacked the Burrow to get to him? What if Ron was right? What if one of the other Weasleys were... Harry could not let the rest of that image form. Instead, he joined Ron in searching for the missing number, browsing through a stack of old papers on the kitchen counter. "You check the fridge door. I'll..." Before Harry could finish, they heard the same loud pop noise from the living room. "See?" said Hermione. "She's here." Racing into the living room, they found Ginny by the fireplace, bags in hand. Ron and Harry gave a relieved gasp at the sight of her. Yet something was off about her. Ginny looked completely different from any other time Harry had seen her. She wasn't the cheerful, if not shy Ginny he'd seen before, but she looked tired, upset, even angered. "Where's my room?" Ginny grunted. "Where have you been?" said Ron. "What took you so long?" "Just take me to my room," snapped Ginny. Not wanting a fight, Harry and Hermione brought Ginny upstairs, offering to help with her bags, but she told them bluntly that she could do it herself. Once they got to her room, the door was slammed shut in all their faces. Soon a wide-awake Neville joined them outside Ginny's room. "What happened?" asked Neville. "Don't know," whispered Harry. "Ginny's upset about something." "What's wrong, Ginny?" asked Ron, knocking on the door. "None of your business!" snapped Ginny. "Ron, give her space," said Hermione. Harry bravely approached the door and spoke. "I'm glad you got here safe. I hope everything is okay," he said, those being the only words he could think of. After a long moment, she said nothing. Before the others left, Ginny said one more thing. "Are all boys kids?" she asked. Harry, Ron and Neville stood dumbfounded. They had no idea how to respond to that. However, Hermione immediately knew what to say. "Most times," said Hermione, shocking the others, and giving Ron a glare, no doubt remembering his actions and attitude during the Yule Ball. Finally the door opened and a distraught Ginny emerged. "I'm sorry," she said. "Ginny, what's going on?" asked a concerned Ron. Ginny took a deep breath. "Percy's been promoted." That should have been big news, but the way Ginny sounded made it sound like there was more to it. "Congrats," said Harry half-heartedly. "Why? He doesn't deserve it," replied Ginny bitterly. "What happened?" asked Ron. "Percy got promoted to junior assistant to the Minister of Magic. After Dad called, he came by to tell us all the good news. But Dad thought Fudge only gave him the job to spy on our family. This caused a pretty big row in the family. Percy told Dad he was an idiot and he lacked any ambition," said Ginny. "What?" snapped Ron, growing angrier and angrier. "Yeah, and he got especially upset when he learned Ron was with Harry and I was joining him soon. Said they were putting us in danger, having us be around you. And that if we had any sense, we'd sever ties with you. Mum said not to speak ill of Harry after all he's been through. He stormed out of there. Broke Mum's heart," continued Ginny. Harry felt an uncomfortable mix of anger and regret. How could Percy do this to his own family, especially Mrs. Weasley, the people who loved him and supported him no matter what? Still, was this Harry's fault? Had he come in between Percy and his family? Would they be better off if they severed ties? Without thinking, Harry blurted out, "I'm sorry." Harry and Ron just waved him off. "Sorry for what?" said Ron. "Harry, you're not the one who forced Percy to choose between his family and a job," ensured Ginny. "But even so, even with Percy's love of rules and authority, I never thought he would do this," said Hermione, showing the same shock and outrage as the others. "Yeah, didn't you used to say he was your mother's golden boy?" said Neville. "Not anymore," said Ron bitterly. "That little piece of shit." Mrs. Fig appeared in the hallway, wide awake from her nap. "You must be Ginny." "Yes," said Ginny, changing her expression and her tone. "You must be Mrs. Fig." "Ah, yes. Now, I just realised how late it's getting. You five should be getting back. I would hate for you to get in trouble with the Dursleys," said Mrs. Fig. In all the commotion and the events of the day, Harry had forgotten about the time. The Dursleys, though hating him being around, would want him to greet Dudley on his return home, as if Dudley was a soldier returning home from war. "She's right, we should go back," said Harry. "We can talk about this later." "Right, come on, Ron," said Hermione, trying to calm down an already angered Ron. "Would be nice to see where you grew up," said Neville, trying to diffuse the tension, but not realising how uncomfortable the sentence made Harry. When Ron, Hermione and Neville were already downstairs, Harry turned to Ginny. "I really am sorry," he said. Strangely, Harry's modesty seemed to amuse Ginny, and actually made her giggle. "Has anyone ever told you? You're too noble for your own good sometimes?" Harry, surprised by her, smiled. "Not often." "Well, you are. It's Percy who was acting like a git, not you," she said. "Still, your mother told her not to speak ill of me."
Before Ginny could respond, Ron called up from downstairs. Harry! Ginny! What's taking so long? We're right behind you! Relax! Snapped Ginny, before turning back to Harry. We better go. You coming? Right behind you, replied Harry. Before anything else could be said, they joined the group downstairs, returning to number 4 Privet Drive, much to Harry's dismay. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that, because that's a long one. Ouch, my throat. But again, rather eventful. I love that Ron isn't just the jealous brother in this. He's not going to get angry for the reasons he shouldn't. It's very easy to write Ron as being the dumb comic relief best friend who likes to eat, gets jealous over Hermione, and gets angry over Harry and Ginny. I like how he's written in this. Genuinely a best friend who's really worried about his family. And the tiny bits of flirting between him and Hermione. That's really cute. They were blushing over the trunk. As you guys know, I'm a hardcore romantic. And Neville being here as well and being happy for being friends outside of Hogwarts is lovely. And I really like Mrs. Figg in this. That she's finally able to show her colours and let Harry have a good time without worrying about him not being able to visit anymore. That's lovely. And Percy. Oh, Percy. I feel sorry for him, to be honest. Just misguided, I think. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Love you guys. Stay safe. Bye.